since I walked in this morning. And so thank you again to Laurel, and to the committee, and to every single person for making this such a special, safe space for me and for all of us. So I guess I will just jump in. I have a whole hour, I think, or a lot of time with you. So um, and I'm just gonna share my story, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. And I There are certain groups in Los Angeles. You've probably heard of the Pacific Group, which they always dress up in a suit. I'm not part of the Pacific Group, but I got sober with the Burbank Group, which is kind of similar, and so I'm used to dressing up, and so I please just accept, this is my normal thing. So, um, how many of y'all have ever heard of Lubbock? How many of y'all are from Lubbock? No hand. Oh, one hand. All right, neighbor. I was born and raised. Oh, two hands. Well, no, I'm a Longhorn. But I was born and raised in Lubbock, back in the '70s, and I grew up in this pretty wonderful home. Albeit it was very machismo, very Latino, very Catholic, very military, very all the things that I was not. Um, and uh, and I knew from a very early age that being gay, I was not going to be these things, these roles, these expectations of me. And I didn't know yet how to process any of that. And I had a twin brother, Albert, and we were both gay. We knew it, but there's not a lot happening in Lubbock, and so we just kind of kept all this to ourselves. And then I remember in the '80s, the AIDS epidemic happened, and it was in full swing, and it was awful. And I remember my mother sitting us down, and she said, "If you're gay, you're going to hell." Now, I was still fairly young. I don't know, maybe 10 years old. I don't remember. But I remember that thinking that that was what was going to happen to me. I was going to get AIDS and die because I'm gay. That was my punishment from God, right? Especially growing up in a Catholic household. So, I didn't really know what any of this meant, but we just kept going and doing what we were doing. And I'm sure many of you have been to a lot of Mexican parties, Latino parties, and everyone's like passing the little niños, the sips of tequila and the beer and the cerveza. So I had plenty of that growing up, but it wasn't, so I wasn't afraid of alcohol from a very early age, but I didn't consume it like I was trying to escape anything at that time. As soon as I graduated high school, I was off to the races, right? I left Lubbock and I went to Austin and then went to the University of Texas, Hook 'em Horns, and I think they're playing right now. And it was great. I was finally away from home. I could go do all of the things that I wanted to do and be gay. And as gay as I wanted to be, although I was still in the closet. I still had girlfriends over here because I was living this outward life that I needed everyone else to see. But I was going off and doing the things that I wanted to do. And it was super fun. I was in a lot of social groups, a lot of fraternity groups, and I had so much fun that I ended up getting a DWI. I was fortunate in that it was right after my 21st birthday, so I was a little lucky in that regard. I'd been out drinking all day, as we do on college football days, and somehow I ended up driving 50 miles into the next county, Bastrop County, which was in the middle of nowhere. And I apparently was playing slalom with the mailboxes, and this police officer pulled me over in Bastrop, and I thought he was really hot, and I thought he was pulling me over because he wanted to ask me out. So I get out of the car, like, trying to be sexy and stumbling over. He's like, you don't need to worry about that. Just come on over. So, needless to say, that was my first of many arrests. And when they took my license away, I didn't think for a minute that I had any kind of a problem with alcohol or drinking, because after all, that's what college kids did, right? I was just doing what all of us do. And so after they took my license away, I drank more because I didn't have to be responsible. I could just go out and party even more. And it was fantastic. And somehow I graduated from University of Texas by the skin of my teeth. I honestly, I think they just wanted me out of there versus actually making my way out. So I graduated and I stayed in Austin for a couple more years, working in the tech sector. And it was lovely. I loved living in Austin. And then for those of y'all that remember, in 2001 was 9/11, right? Actually, first, before then was the dot-com bubble burst, right? So the dot-com bubble burst in early 2001. I lost my job and I was unemployed for a long time. And then 9/11 happened, right? So 2001, the country was in much disarray, as it kind of has been in the last several years. Maybe it never came out of disarray since then, but I couldn't find a job. Right, a whole year had almost gone by in 2021, and so I decided to leave. And I actually left Texas on my 25th birthday, on September 22nd, 2021, and I moved to California. And one second, the air is very dry over here. Um, and so when I moved to California, I knew it was the right decision for two reasons. One, no one cared that I was gay. It was awesome. But two, no one cared about the color of my skin. And I never really knew or actually realized that I was living in institutionalized racism for so long. I knew my parents went to segregated schools. I knew they survived a lot of hell growing up from white folks in segregated Lubbock. And as a result, they raised me to be a certain way, right? To have an English name, to not speak Spanish, all of these kinds of things. Um, but I never really knew how much systemic oppression actually existed until I got out of it, and it was awesome. I was loving California even more right from the get go. And I had moved in with my brother Tony, and I started going to San Francisco quite a bit. And San Francisco was where I say I get my gay culturalization, because obviously that's like one of the gay meccas of the world. And I had a great time. And I ended up meeting my first boyfriend, Brandon, at the Folsom Street Fair. I don't know if any of y'all ever heard of it. It's a really quaint little thing. And, just mind you, I'm a small town West Texas boy, suddenly now thrust into San Francisco. And there was a lot of that, right? So it was, my eyes wide open. It was a whole new experience for me. And I loved it. And I remember this is about the next year. My brother said, "Hey, why don't you invite Brandon to come to our Thanksgiving dinner?" And I thought, oh my gosh, wow, this is kind of great. Like some family acceptance for me being gay and having a gay boyfriend. So awesome, right? So I invite Brandon. We have this lovely Thanksgiving dinner. Some relatives had come over. And at this point, I'm still not really out to anybody except for a couple of my brothers and my cousins. And so we have a lovely dinner, and then afterwards we go take a nap, nap. And we started to have sex, and we were in my room, and all of a sudden I hear this big scream. Ah. And I look up, and there's my niece, who had walked in on us. She was 19 at the time, so like, it wasn't awful, but I don't know what she saw, but but I said, Amber, if you have a problem with what you saw, please talk to me, and we'll sort it out. And she said, everything's fine, Uncle, not a big deal. Well, um, it was a big deal. And like about a week after that, I had ended up moving in with Brandon moved in with me in San Francisco. And so I'm living in San Francisco, and and I get this call from my brother Michael from here in Lubbock, and he just starts berating me, yelling at me. How could you do this to the family? How could you be gay? How could you destroy our family? He'd interrogated my nephews to see if I'd ever molested them and told me I had to stay away from them. It was just about the worst phone call I'd ever had in my life. And, I was crying. It was awful, because we've been a pretty close knit, Latino family. And all of a sudden, I'm just in shock at what was happening here. And so at the end of it, he says, I'm going to tell mom and dad. So I knew I was going to have to come out to my parents in that moment. And so I took a deep breath and I had to call my mom. And this was just a couple of weeks out from Christmas. And I had missed the Christmas before. So I was very excited to go home for Christmas. And she answered the phone and she was super happy and whistling. I said, I'm making your favorite cookies. I can't wait to see you in a few weeks. And then I had to tell her what happened. She starts crying. She fell to tears. What did I do wrong as a mother? How could it, all this kind of stuff. And and at the end of it, I asked her if I should come home still, and she said no. And so in that moment, I felt this huge abandonment, right? All of these things that, I started to experience in terms of my sexual identity, who I am, abandonment and fear, and all of these things. I think we were talking about these in some of the workshops. And I had zero coping tools, right? The only thing I really knew how to deal with was to drink alcohol. And so that Christmas, it was just me and Brandon. I was drinking a lot, and I had no idea, because I had never seen one before, um, that Brandon was a porn star and a meth addict. And so do we, I was blindsided by the whole thing. So we went through the holidays, and we had gone to this club in San Francisco. It was my favorite club, the Powerhouse. And we'd gone there, and Brandon, very successful at what he did, and ended up like bringing like a dozen guys over to my place. Well, I was pretty pathetic, and I was in the corner because I was so sad, and it was a sad scene. So, this was the moment that other drugs entered my story. And at that time, Brandon introduced something on a mirror, and he said, "Here, try some of this. It'll make you feel better." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Just trust me." Right? Famous last words. So I did. And instantly felt awesome, right? This scores of depression, whatever, just eviscerated. And because the alcohol hadn't been working as much as I drank, it had been working. Now something else was like boom. And I was able to participate in the night's events. Uh, and then the next day, when I actually, stopped to take it, we actually had a performance. Ooh. Speaking of performance, and I play saxophone, and I had to play at noon that day in San Francisco, and my mouth would not work. So I had a solo, and and the band director was like, "Oh God, I know what's happening here." So, but I made a vow. I made a vow in that moment that I was never going to do that stuff again, right? Because I suddenly knew what it was, and I'd heard of amphetamines. I'd never heard of meth, but I was just remember I was this good, quiet little West Texas boy. I didn't know anything from anything. Um, and so I remember that relationship with Brandon didn't work out too well. That's another long story for another day. But I ended up moving to Sacramento, and really to escape Brandon. His meth addiction really crippled that really quickly. And so I'm in Sacramento, uh, and about 6 months later, I was super drunk, and all I kept thinking about was how good I felt that one night on New Year's Eve. And so I found obviously some stuff. So that sort of became my new MO, right? Every time I would go get drunk and be really drunk, I'd want to go do other stuff, right? ABC, alcohol becomes crystal, becomes Coke, becomes anything else, right? And so what became a 6 month gap became a 3 month gap, became a monthly gap, became a pretty much daily use at that point. And so here I am now, moving steady along. Actually, it was declining pretty quickly, but I didn't know it yet. And so I ended up moving to Los Angeles in 2004. It somehow landed a pretty good job. Um, Talk about a functional alcoholic, right? And so I landed this job in Koreatown, and I was working with all of these Koreans who loved to drink. And so every single day, actually, I showed up to work completely blitzed. On my first day of work, December 30th, 2004, I was blitzed, and I reeked of alcohol. And they said, "You're going to fit in so nicely here. Let's go have a drink." And so we did. And so I got into this really, this point where, and I didn't know about the West Hollywoods and the Long Beaches and the Silver Lakes at the time. I just knew about downtown LA. They would go get drunk every single day, and then I'd go downtown and do my business. And so I got to this point where I would show up to work either extremely high, that I'd have to drink alcohol to come down, or I'd be extremely drunk and have to use something to lift me up. And it was this horrific, vicious cycle that I just kept doing somehow for a year and a half. How I lasted that long without destroying the company, I don't know. But my manager finally sat me down one day. She said, Robert, I know what you're doing, and I can't let you destroy this company. I'm going to let you go. You're officially terminated, but here's $10,000. Why don't you go get sober and come back in 30 days? I don't know about you, but I suddenly had $10,000 and a lot of time on my hands. And I, again, was more off to the races than I'd ever been. And at that point, this was February 2006. At that point, I was already pretty obliterated, right? Physically, I already had the, the, the gray skin. I reeked. It was just bad, right? So how could things get any worse? Well, they did, right? The pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization period was just beginning. This was the period, and which would exist the next 4 years, where where all hell completely broke loose, and I lost everything. Before I knew it, I was homeless. I become HIV positive, right? For the fortune told from decades earlier. I've been raped. I've been shot at. I've been beaten up in my own home several times. I was in and out of the jails and the hospitals. I remember I got arrested by the same sheriff who had arrested me the year before. It was exactly 1 year later at the same intersection. He said, I remember you. I arrested you because you had meth. I bet you have meth on you now. So not only did I have drugs, I had the drug dealer with me who got to walk, and I went to jail. So it and you know, I I kept putting myself into all of these situations, right? Never once thinking that I was the one putting myself into these places. I was so good at playing the victim card. Like, oh, I was just in the middle of this gang warfare. People are bullets flying. Here I am, my life, so I need to go get high again or get drunk again or whatever. Um, and uh, and so I played the victim card pretty well. And I never took care of my HIV because, again, this was how I was supposed to die, right? So I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And I was in the hospital and out of the hospital and in the jails and out of the jails. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a foxhole agnostic. I've heard it in the rooms many times. This is where, you're in one of these, like I was in the jails or in the hospital, and I'm like, dear God, please get me out of the situation. I swear I will never drink or use again. I promise you, I'm going to go I'm going to get clean. And then as soon as I get out of whatever institution I'm in, straight off to the bar or drinking or whatever it was. Um, and I did that for so many years. That 4 years was just that utter hell. I had a lot of time to think when I was in these hospitals and in these jail cells, and I would think, what happened to this guy that I used to be? I used to be this motivated, ambitious guy who wanted to conquer the world. I was told as a little boy I could be anything I wanted and could do whatever I wanted to be whatever I wanted to be. But now I was this empty shell of a man. And I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't want to exist. I was hoping for that proverbial earthquake in California to just open up, the earth to open up, swallow me whole so that I could vanish and not have to deal with me. I wanted to disappear. And so I remember I guess it was somewhere in June, the judge said, Hey, Robert, if you get arrested one more time, you're going to federal prison for 3 years. And I thought, okay, that's fantastic. That is awesome, right? And then a month later, my doctor, when I got out of the hospital one more time, she said, Hey, Robert, if you keep going the way you're going, you've got 6 months to live. And I said, That's fantastic. That's exactly what I want to have happen, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen that image of this woman sliding into home base with a martini glass in hand and a cigarette over here, like just, sliding into home, being done. That's how I wanted to write it. I was just going to go out with glory, blazing guns, and just call it a night, right? Call it a life. So whatever happened first, I was happy with, right? Now, how bad must things be if death and prison are my only two options, and I'm excited about either one of them, right? But that's how bad things had gone. That's how dark things had gone inside. And so I went on like that for a couple more months, and then something happened. My parents came all the way from Lubbock and drove all the way to Los Angeles to see what had become of their long lost son. And they found me and they said, Hey, we want you to know that we love you. And here's what we can do to help you get sober. And if you can't get sober, that's it, right? Hands off, right? I put them through hell. There was a lot of shit that happened in that long period of using, but, um, but then that happened. And I heard in a meeting once that if I had to define rock bottom as something tangible, it would be when what I just lost or am about to lose suddenly becomes more important than my next hit or my next drink or my next whatever. And for me, it took those three things to finally hit me, right? My family, my freedom, and my life were all on the line. And for the first time in my life, I distinctly remember making the decision that I wanted to live. Now, I don't think, at least not in my experience or my history, that I ever remember having to wake up and say, hey, I want to live today, right? It's just something automatic that I go do. But I knew exactly what was going to happen if I didn't make that decision. And I knew I had to make changes. And it was a very odd moment when all of that happened. I was in my friend had come to pick me up. I was in a really bad place. I was in the front seat of the passenger side underneath the dashboard. I used to be a lot littler. And I was just crying and I was stuck there for hours and hours and he couldn't get me out. And but that's when I finally just kind of like started to surrender. I didn't fully surrender yet, but I started to surrender because I knew that I needed to make change. And so my higher power is pretty savvy. I didn't know how to make change. The court had been ordering me to go to AA meetings for a very long time, and I never did. I just had people come over and fill them out for me. Um, and so I didn't know a single sober person in Los Angeles. This very attractive man from one of my court classes said, "Hey, Robert, I'm going to go to the Burbank group. You want to come with me for these? And we'll actually go to a meeting together." Now, I had ulterior motive. And so he said, "Just meet me there. I'll see you there." So I show up at the Burbank group and he's not there. He's nowhere to be found. But here I am suddenly sitting in a chair and the meeting starts. And so I'm stuck. But I heard what I needed to hear. And it was a 90-minute meeting. And for 90 minutes, every single word that all of you said just hit me like a bullet. And I sat there and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And I didn't know what to do when the meeting ended, but y'all gave me my first direction and said, keep coming back. They hugged me so hard through my tears and said, keep coming back. And so I did because I didn't know what else to do. Right at this point, I couldn't even brush my teeth without wanting to take a drink or tie my shoes without wanting to take a hit. I didn't know how to grieve without being intoxicated in some way. And so I put all of my faith into you and into this program because I had nowhere else to go. Um, and so I kept coming back to those meetings, and for the first 3 months, I couldn't read a page in the big book, or I couldn't go to a meeting without falling into tears because it was just all so real. It was all too much. The stories were different, the scenarios were different, but the feelings, the realities, the isms were all of the same, and bless you, it was just so much. And so I kept doing what y'all told me to do, and little by little things got better and better. And I was like, "Wow, okay, so maybe there is some truth to these folks." So things were actually getting a little bit better. I remember I could hold my first conversation. um, and uh, and so probably maybe about 6 or 7 months in, this was actually on my dad's birthday, and I'll never forget this because it's my dad's birthday. That same judge came up to me. I was facing these prison, what are these, all these court, whatever, these cases. And he said, "Hey, Robert, whatever you're doing a fantastic job. I'm going to drop all of your charges. You're free to go." And I thought, oh, wow, like, is this real? But he's like, "Yeah, go." The same day, my HIV doctor, who had just told me I had 6 months to live, she said, "Hey, Robert, whatever you're doing a fantastic job. You're healthier now than a normal 33-year-old who doesn't have HIV. So keep it up. Keep up the good work. You're healthy. You're free to go. Go enjoy your life." And so a normal person probably would have been ecstatic, well, a normal person probably wouldn't put themselves in those situations, but a normal person probably would have been, happy. And I was not. I was miserable. I'm a really good alcoholic. And somebody said, I shared in a meeting like how unhappy I was. And they're like, well, why are you so unhappy? I said, well, I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a job. I don't have an apartment. I don't have all of these things. And they said, well, let me ask you something. How are you praying? I said, well, I'm praying for a boyfriend and I'm praying for a job, praying for an apartment. And they said, well, hey, let me make a suggestion, if I may. Why don't you pray for other people? So I don't know what good that's going to do. But y'all have never led me astray thus far. So at night, I went home and I did it. For the first time in my life, I prayed for other people and I meant it. Now, I didn't know what to pray for. It'd never been a true connection, right? I'd feared this Catholic upbringing that I had, right? I didn't have this, old man with a beard in the sky kind of a belief because growing up gay in a Catholic world just wasn't real for me. And I was always foxhole agnostic, where I just knew some concept of God, something was up there, but that was about it. And so that night I said, well, I'm going to pray for people who need help, people who don't know they need help or how to accept help, because that was me. I would not accept help from anyone. I had too big of an ego. And so that night, the next day was like the floodgates opened. People started coming up to me and say, "Hey, Robert, can you take me here? Can you take me to a meeting? You seem to have gotten your health together. Can you take me to my doctor's appointment and help me ask questions? Can you come with me to my court date because you seem to have gotten this figured out?" And it was like this epiphany happened, right? For the first time in my life, I believed that a blessing. I realized that a blessing is not a blessing unless it's shared. The fact that I get to wake up sober, right? First of all, I haven't been up for like 20 days, but I get to wake up sober as a sober man, and now I have to be of service to other people, right? I have to go give it away. So that epiphany was this bright light moment for me where I got to say, hey, this isn't about me anymore. It's about how I could be of service as my higher power needs me to be for you. Now, I don't know what that looks like. Um, so I just started saying yes to a lot of things and being of service at the group level, at the district level, at the intergroup level, whatever. Wherever I could, somebody needed help, I said yes. And so I started throwing myself everywhere in terms of what I could do for others. And that service became the foundation of my program these last 16 years. And I never looked back. All right. What then transpired is I started to do this community level programming in West Hollywood. I somehow, because I was doing so much in terms of community service, excuse me, I became appointed as a city official in West Hollywood. And I was on the Lesbian Gay Advisory Board, which is this rare, at that time, was the only LGBTQ governmental jurisdiction in the entire world. And so it was a really great opportunity. And at first, when they came to me and said, hey, we'd like to appoint you to this position, I said, no, I'm just an alcoholic. I'm an addict. What do you want me for? And my sponsor here, Mikey, slapped me in the head and said, what are you doing? Go say yes. So I did. And it was this remarkable opportunity where I got to start working with a broader community and thinking about how we can help everyone through some policy changes. And I distinctly remember making a commitment when I got sober that I wanted to do whatever I could for our community to help them gain some stability. Because stability looks different for all of us, right? For some of us, it's healthcare access, for some of it's housing access, education access, food access, whatever it is. um, it's really bad out there. And I saw so many people in my disease dying every single day from this disease and from mental health and from being homeless. All right. When you compound all of these issues together, our chances of survival are not great, right? And especially being out there on the streets, and especially LGBTQ and Black and Brown communities, we have even more difficult of a chance at getting somewhere stable than our other counterparts. And so I seized this opportunity so that I could go do that very thing. And I started to do that very thing by creating programs for people. And I remember one of the very first things I ever did It was something simple. I thought it was an alcohol and drug-free New Year's Eve event because, hey, we like to celebrate New Year's too, right? And so I did it right in the middle of West Hollywood in Boys Town, and like 1,000 people came, right? Never done it before. Who knew how many people were going to show up? And I, I just thought, cool, we did this thing. And I get a message on New Year's Day the next morning, and someone sent me this very long message. And he said, "Hey, Robert, I wanted you to know that first of all, to thank you for hosting this event, but here's what it meant to me. I was on my way to go relapse and end my life. I did not want to start the new year again with the same me, the same mistakes over and over and over. And and as I was on my way to my dealer's house, I got a message from someone who was at your event, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come? It's really fun. We're having this great time." And so he said, "Sure." So he went because he really was just going to go say goodbye to his friend, and that was it. And he ended up having a great time. He made it sober the whole night. He's still alive. And so I got to see firsthand how some of this program, started to make a positive change. So I started to do more. I applied and I got into grad school at UCLA, Luskin School of Public Affairs, and I ended up getting my master's degree in public policy. Um, and I ended up which was really cool. I got to give the commencement address from like 5,000 people, which was also on my father's birthday, right? This is a significant day in my history. And I got to have everyone stand up and give my dad a happy birthday, just like y'all did right here, which was thank you, by the way. And so I got to now be in this space, and I'm working with governments from city, county, state, and federal all day long. And as you can imagine, especially this year, it's pretty kind of crazy, hostile. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, it's nuts out there, right? And so, but I get to do this every day now, working with public policy. I work at the Los Angeles LGBT Center as a public policy officer, and and I work in this realm of like trying to create stability for immigrants, for undocumented people, for homeless people, for mental health and substance abuse and transgender folks, and the whole gamut of these issues that impact us. And I hope that it provides some sense of stability for our community. But I'm honored to be able to do that, and it provides me the opportunity to go out and serve many of our folks, right? Because in my belief, if we can give as much stability to somebody, then they might be able to focus on that 24 hours. And then hopefully there's a chance that they might get that 24 hours and they can focus on the next 24 hours, right? One day at a time. And so I'm very grateful to be in that moment. Now, there's been a lot of things that have happened in the last 16 years. I had the great privilege of going back and officiating several weddings of people that I know and love. I got to play my saxophone at my brother's wedding. I got to play my saxophone and march for President Obama in his inauguration in 2013. I've, being sworn in as a city official, all of these wonderful, exciting things. By the way, I get to yell at the governor too, in California, which is kind of fun. Um, but all of these wonderful and exciting things give me a greater high than anything I could have ever imagined from a bottle or a pipe or a needle or whatever. And so I look forward to being able to do and continue to do those kinds of things for our community. Now, it hasn't all been great. In 2012, my twin brother Albert, he passed away from AIDS, and he actually used to live here in Houston. I don't know if any of y'all might know him or not, but he was one of us, and he was always the good twin. I was the bad twin. I was the one who drank and did all the bad stuff, and he never cursed, never drank, never did drugs, never smoked, never did anything wrong, at least that I knew of. Until the very end, when we found out that not only was he an alcoholic and a drug addict, but he also had full blown AIDS, and he never told anyone until he went in the hospital for the last time. And it made me, first of all, I was only like 3 or 4 years sober at the time. And my sponsor, Mikey, really helped me through. It got everyone in LA and across the country to support me through that because I lost my twin brother. And that I don't know if I was strong enough yet to deal with the weight of losing my twin brother in sobriety, but I did. With your help, I was able to get through that because I had to now show up for my entire Latino family. I mean, there's hundreds on my mom's side alone, and be this example as an openly gay, HIV positive Latino man in recovery, and show them that it's okay to be this thing, to be this person that I am with all these labels that used to be part of the reason why I drank and used so much. I now get to be this positive example in this community and help move my aunts and uncles into the 21st century. And so it was a heavy moment for many reasons, but I got through it. Um, and then, as you all know, COVID happened in 2020, and my parents started to get very depressed. My one of my uncles, my mom's brother, died from COVID right out of the gate. My dad's aunt died from cancer. And it was a really tough time for my parents. And so I decided to pack up in Los Angeles and I moved back to Lubbock and I got to spend time with my parents and help them through this very difficult moment. Right. And so I was so grateful for being able to be a sober man at this point. I don't know how long I was sober I was, but I was at least 10, 11 years sober. But I got to be there for my parents, right? We weren't doing a lot of things else. So I got to cook for them and hear all their stories. And it was the first time that I got to spend time with them as an adult because I bolted, right? Right out of high school, I was out the door and it was like, see ya, right? The only calls they got from me and for a couple of decades were from the county jail. So, so it was nice that I got to finally start to spend time with them as an adult and learn from them and hear their stories about how they fell in love and their struggles and all that kind of stuff. And that was probably one of the greatest blessings I could have experienced was to get to see my parents and see them as human beings and learn from them. And then a year later, in 2021, my mother nearly died. She got super sick, and it was a beginning signs of cancer, but we didn't know it yet, and we thought we were going to lose her in that moment. And I had flown back from California. I was already in California back at this time, and and so we were there in the hospital room, and we were all crying, and it was very intense. We had the priest had already come and read the last rites, and I was holding her hand, and all of a sudden she got very still. She got very still. She stopped crying, and she opened her eyes really big, and she looked at me, and she said, "Should this be my last night, I know that all of my sons are going to be okay, and I can rest easy." Now, in that moment, I just felt all this relief, all of this pressure, all of this stuff just fall from my shoulders, this pressure because for decades I put my parents through hell. They never knew if they were going to get a call from the LA County Coroner's Office or the Sheriff's Office, and with the bad news that something happened to their son, and they lost so much sleep and so much stress because of what I put them through, the hell that I put them through, and for her to be able to say that to me on her deathbed was this sort of moment of absolution, like a some strange form of reverse forgiveness. I don't know, but it was a very powerful moment, and I think for me that that feels like one of those great moments of this one of the great gifts of these programs, right? That the fact that I was able to be sober and show up for my mother and be there for her as she started to get sick was that gift, and then to know that we are good. That thanks to the steps and steps 4 through 9, I was able to work through so much of this trauma with my parents, and we're good. We're on a really good terms together. And we had to talk through a lot of really hard questions, but we did. And fortunately, my mother made it through that period in 2021. And so we had a few more years and together, but she passed away earlier this year. And it was so 2025 has been really challenging. She started to get extremely sick with her cancer in October last year. And she said on Christmas Eve last year, she sat me down. She said, "I've got less than 6 months to live." She was already 3 months into that diagnosis before she had the courage to tell any one of us. So we knew it wasn't very long. And in that moment, when she told me that, I knew not to make it about me. I knew I needed to do everything I could in my power to make it about her. And so I did. I called my boss and said, "I'm going to be here in Lubbock. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to take care of my mom until the end." They said, "Do what you got to do." And so I did. I showed up for her. I cooked for her. I cleaned for her, did whatever we could. Man, it was ugly. It was ugly
for those who ever watched a loved one die of cancer, how bad it can get in the end and how scary it is and painful for them. And again, being one of the gifts of this program was to be able to be there for her and my father, who was, this soldier for her every single day for 658 years. And then she passed, and I was there to hold her hand and to close her eyes when she passed and see her take her last breath. Um, and it was one of the most difficult moments of my life to be able to be there though with my family and to make the decisions that we had to make. I can only attribute that to being sober and the program, the principles that these steps have taught me to do is how to show up, not just for myself, but for everyone else, right? Because in my disease, I was killing myself, but I was also killing everybody else, adding the stress, all the layers of frustration and stuff onto them. And so I knew that my sobriety was helping them stay healthier just a little bit longer. And so she was able to die in peace, knowing that I'm going to be in good hands because I'm with all of you. And and I know that she's okay. I still feel her all here with me, and it's been we were talking about depression in one of the workshops earlier and how it looks and feels in many different shapes and forms. And I've never really experienced depression, but it hit me hard this year. And I've had to rely on the program so much and my sponsor to be able to like show me how to do this because nothing we go through is for the first time. Right? Somebody in the program has been through it before. Someone knows how to get through it sober, and they've showed us how to do this. And so um, I was able to walk through that, and I'm still going through it. It's only been like 9 months or so, but I saw her tombstone for the first time earlier this week, and I made it my mission to take care of my dad and to be here with him because he's really struggling. And so I went to Lubbock. I kind of convinced him to decorate for Christmas because he didn't want to do it. But we were able to decorate for Christmas and get him in the spirit of some things. And we went to Dallas and spent Thanksgiving with my brother. And so it just feels so good to be here in Texas with you and with my family and celebrating 16 because like this feels almost full circle in many ways that I get to honor my mother and support my father and to be here to celebrate with you in this moment. And so I'm super grateful for many reasons. And I have no idea how much time I have, by the way, but I think I've got a few more anecdotes. But um, I there are so many tools that we are given in the program, and I love the principles behind each step, right? The honesty, the willingness, service, all of those good things are magnificent tools that when I am using them in all of my affairs, that means I'm doing an all right job. I might actually make it through the day sober. And I rely on those tools a lot. And when I'm working with my sponsees and we're talking about how we engage with the higher powers and how we utilize the tools of the steps, I always quiz them on what are the principles behind each step and each tradition. They don't always get it, but I will if I teach them anything, it's how to not just understand what the step is, excuse me, but the principle underneath it so that they can in turn know how to apply it in all their affairs, right? Because I remember hearing somewhere in one of the workshops earlier, and I hope that's not cross talking. At some point, we're going to be in a situation where it's just us and a bad decision, and we have to reach out to our higher power, and we have to connect to our higher power, and we have to use those tools to get through that moment. And so there are three that I use on a daily basis. That is gratitude, faith, and humility. I have to have faith that what's in front of me is what my higher power wants me to experience, whether it's good or bad. Right? I didn't like that my brother died. I didn't like that my mother died. I didn't like getting broken up with or losing a job or all of these things. But I learned from all of those experience and I became a stronger person because of them. And I was able to help other people who like others helped me. I can now in turn help other people through that moment. And so I just have to have faith, right? It's hard. life sucks sometimes. And 2025, well, really since 2020, it's been no exception, right? Every year seems to be one giant challenge after another. And yet here we are still sober together. The second tool is humility. Now, again, if you, I told you earlier, I was one of those people who didn't like to accept help. I didn't even want to acknowledge that I needed help. But humility in practice for me means I have to concentrate so hard to be in connection with my higher power. I have to be in alignment with my higher power or else I'm screwed. Right. And when I can feel those rough edges, when I'm starting to slip out of that alignment, when it's Robert's self will run riot, I know that I'm in trouble and I have to jump right back into service. I have to get into action, whether that's getting a new sponsee or finding a new meeting or whatever it is. That way I can get back in alignment with my higher power. When I'm in alignment, I have serenity, and there is nothing worth losing my serenity over. There is not a guy hot enough to make me lose my serenity. There is not a drug that good to make me lose my serenity, or a drink that tasty or powerful. Because this serenity is the most powerful possession I have when I'm connected to my higher power. I don't need anything else. I just need to have my recovery to hold on to that connection, and I'm good. And so I have to stay humble, and I just have to be what my higher power needs me to be so that I can be of service to you. And so I pray every single day, and I put that in my gratitude lists about my gratitude list, my steps. I look at steps 10, 11, and 12 as a sort of like daily practice in terms of I reflect as I'm doing my gratitude list. I reflected my whole day, see how I fucked up or screwed up, and how I can do better the next day. And as I'm doing this, writing it out, that's sort of my meditation back. That's sort of my commitment to my higher power. Like, yeah, here's what I'm going to do to make things a little bit better for the next day. And then I share it out with folks, right? There's my step 12. And so I get to do this little bit of daily reflection every single day and trying to improve my connection with my higher power. And really, so I can listen and learn how to be of service to all of you, right? Because that's where, what happened 16 years ago when I had that epiphany and wanted to be of service and knew that I needed to be of service to stay alive. That's why I get to wake up sober and keep doing this every single day until I die, which is going to be awesome. And then the last piece is gratitude. And what better way to celebrate gratitude than on Thanksgiving weekend? Um, I have to have so much gratitude because 16 plus 1 year plus 1 day ago, I was this homeless guy on Hollywood Boulevard with shit running down my leg, not a dollar to my name, no phone, no car, literally nothing except the will to die. That was me. That's how I wanted to go. And then today, that is not who I am. I get to actually show up and I get to be in these spaces in Sacramento and in LA City Hall and in sober spaces and work with you and love with you and laugh with you and work to try and create more opportunities for you so that you could thrive. And I can't think of a better way to be part of my recovery than to get to do that with you every single day. So I think I'm just going to end there if that's all right. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And I'll be